Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey YouTube, it's the Piper. I'm actually going to delete all of this footage and refilm it because this sucks. They stole the cell phone from sorry. I don't know where I was going with that. Scratch it.
Have you ever?
Hey YouTube, it's Piper. Okay, so I was going to do this video and recap only the second episode of The Passage, but luckily for me, on Sunday, the third episode of The Passage was out early, so I got to watch that on Hulu thanks to some very helpful Instagrammers. They ended up writing me while I was, because I'm following, or I don't even think I'm following, but I ended up commenting under The Passage, like their little page, and because it's The Passage Fox, and so I commented and said something about it, and then luckily all these people started writing me and they were like, hey, the third episode is up on Hulu and you don't have to wait till Monday. And I was like, score, because I really didn't want to, and I wanted to make sure I got caught up because I only recapped the first episode and I have not recapped the second episode, and so I was going to do the second and then the third separately, but it turns out since I've already seen the third one, I'm going to go ahead and recap the second one and the third one today. The second episode, the title of that episode was called You Owe Me a Unicorn. And that episode starts or continues with Amy and Brad being on the run from the Project Noah officers or agents. And so Clark Richards is heading those agents and they're out looking for Brad and Amy hardcore. So as you will remember in the first episode, Brad ended up getting shot. So he is obviously not shot like deadly or anything. It wasn't a lethal blow, but it was enough to kind of slow him down. Him and Amy are looking for a way to get away from the Project Noah people, and they come upon this school, and I guess this class is getting ready to go on a field trip, so the buses are loading with kids and teachers are standing around. Brad has the genius idea to run up to the bus and is like, hey, I forgot my daughter's permission slip. So, and they're looking at him like, oh, how sweet, you're a single dad, you're doing this all by yourself. And so they totally take pity on him and just let Amy get on the bus. Now, I highly doubt that would happen in real life because I'm like, don't you have to know who the kid is? And these two women did not look like they had any clue who Amy was. But I guess they're just like, one black kid looks like another black kid. I'm totally kidding. Ignore that. It was just weird that they just let her on the bus. So she gets on the bus and she unlocks the emergency door at the back and Brad hops on. Of course, other kids are looking because they're like, who are you and why is there an adult here? And basically Brad's like, mind your business, and takes this kid's cell phone. Obviously, he needs an untraceable phone, and this kid, because every kid seems to have a cell phone this day and age, these kids all have cell phones, or at least this one kid did, and Brad took it. They do lose Project Noah operatives for a little bit, so it actually works out. But then, unfortunately, even though they've procured a new vehicle, Brad ends up passing out behind the wheel of that vehicle. Amy, not knowing what to do, decides to take the cell phone that he stole from the kid on the bus and calls Lila. Now, here is where that seems weird to me. One, I don't think Brad ever gave Amy Lila's number because why would he? That's his ex-wife. As you remember, his ex-wife is also Nina Dobrov's doppelganger. Or maybe Nina Dobrov is her doppelganger because she's older. But anyway, his ex-wife, Dr. Lila Kyle, is somehow programmed in that phone, and Amy calls her. And so Amy is, trying to tell her, like, hey, he's not moving, he's unconscious. And first of all, she capitalizes on the fact that Brad's not conscious and can't tell Amy what she can and can't tell her. So, of course, she asks Amy, hey, where are you guys at? Amy starts looking for a sign, and she's like, I think we are near Wisconsin. Lila, tucks that away because she knows exactly where they're going to go if they're near Wisconsin. So she ends up telling Amy to go ahead and give Brad a noogie in the chest. Now, I don't know if bullies back in the day knew this or not, and they were given noogies forever. At least when I was a kid, noogies are still a thing. But apparently, noogies are used to wake up unconscious people. I'm like, next time someone's unconscious next to me, I'm going to noogie them, even if they're asleep. And of course, Brad is like, ow, because in TV shows, people wake up from noogies to the chest when they've been shot. He gets up, sees that Amy called Lila. He talks to Lila for about a hot minute, and then he chucks the cell phone. Obviously, he doesn't chuck the cell phone because he just hates phones. He chucks the cell phone because Project Noah can trace them if they're, tracing Lila's phone calls. Him and Amy have a really good rapport together, and I really like this show because Fox seems to know how to incorporate political issues and social issues into a story without making it so overbearing. The CW, which if you watch my other videos, you know that I recap Roswell, the reboot of Roswell. For some reason, the CW with Roswell and with Charmed, both those reboots, they really did not meld the real world with the fantastical world very well. They just did not know how to mix those two without it coming off clunky and just too much. And so it's really overbearing and it doesn't make any sense and it's almost comical the way they do it. But The Passage, I don't know who the writers are, but they are geniuses. Because I never read the series, but I do plan to go back and maybe read the series. And I already feel a really strong attachment to Amy specifically, and to Brad, and even Lila, and just, Dr. Lear. And you're able to really just connect with these characters, and they meld these real life issues with, their fantasy issues. And like this funny part that happens when we're at Project Noah in Colorado, we're in their 4B, which is their basement full of vampires. And so it's where they hold all the people, the inmates, and Tim Fanning that they have experimented on. And so it's funny because not only do they have a super diverse cast, I'm talking Asian people, black people, white people, everybody, like they really have a good mix of just different ethnicities. And, it's wonderful. None of their ethnicities keep them or bar them from finding love or being happy or anything. They're not stereotype kind of characters, and they're all just like great actors in and of themselves, so it really works. Obviously, racism plays a big part of life in this day and age, especially with this whole wall issue and Trump and all that other stuff. But I like how they included it without you even realize that you are being spoon-fed an issue. One of the guys who is a scientist/doctor, they're down there walking around and showing people stuff, and it's hilarious because one woman is in her little cage or cell, or he's like, this delightful white supremacist. So it's funny, like he adds it in and you can tell like, okay, yeah, this is an issue, but it's not such an issue that it just pulls you out of the story. Then you have Dr. Lear, Jonas Lear, and Nicole, or Dr. Major Nicole Sykes, they're talking. And when they're speaking to each other, Dr. Lear is kind of feeling her out because you can tell he's having a moral dilemma and he is not okay with them doing this on a child. He really feels differently about it. And not only does he feel a moral dilemma, he totally verbalizes it pretty much any chance he gets. It's really weird because he verbalizes it, but then he's clearly not leaving Project Noah. Him and Dr. Tim Fanning are the ones that came up with the serum that they are injecting into people. Well, they didn't necessarily come up with it, and they didn't plan for Tim Fanning to be bitten. But he was bitten and changed, and so they use his blood as part of this serum that they use to inject into other people because they're hoping that it will not only increase longevity, but it'll also eliminate all diseases. He is not okay with what they're doing right now. And so he is asking Dr. Sykes about it, and she, although she's like, yeah, we kind of got to do this, you can tell behind her eyes she's not okay with it either. And so even though we don't know very much about her background, we do feel a pull to her. And in her mind, there's no other way around this because they have to try this. Again, I don't know why they're so fixated on Amy, considering there are a ton of kids, I'm sure, who are in the foster care system that don't have parents. But for whatever reason, they're just on her trail now, probably because she's been with Brad. And so now it's kind of like, well, we got to use her because now she's kind of already a part of this. And we also see Amy and Brad, and he has a friend in Wisconsin who turns out to be an military instructor of his, and I believe he was in the Navy. She's an ex-Navy instructor and also Brad's friend who lives off the grid, and she's kind of like a pistol packing mama who's got, all these sort of cool booby traps set up around her house. Nobody's going to get to her house without her knowing about it first. That's why obviously Brad decides that that's the best place to take Amy because they'll be the safest there. This woman is Lacey Antoine, and not only was she an ex-military instructor, she's also an ex-nun. And I'm just like, wow, she did everything. And she helps him and Amy out, and she's even sweet to Amy. She's kind of like, I don't know if she's old enough to be like a grandma, but I don't look at her like that. But she is like really sweet to Amy, and I guess kind of plays that aunt role. Maybe she's an auntie for her. Or she gets rid of the car that they had to, procure to get to her house. I guess she has a friend who's into shady business, and that friend's going to take care of the vehicle. And then she arranges for them to get a boat to Canada. And so Brad's all for it. And Brad is really all in for Amy. Like, he has taken on the role as surrogate father, and he's just playing that, and you feel that completely. Even though we don't still know a lot about Brad, we don't even really know a ton about Amy, but we do know more about her than even Brad. And so it's really nice that we feel that connection to them. They build that much care in their characters in one episode that I haven't seen a lot of shows do in like a whole season. So I'm really impressed. We get to see a little bit more about Dr. Jonas Lear, and which is good because we get to see not only more about him, but we actually learn how he and Tim Fanning know each other. We don't learn the whole backstory, but we learn, how it kind of came into being. And what we discover is that this is actually near and dear to Dr. Lear's heart because his wife, Elizabeth, ends up being diagnosed, and I guess this was 3 years ago because the passage takes place like 3 years after Tim Fanning was bitten. So 3 years ago, I guess, his wife ended up being diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and not only was she diagnosed with that, but it's progressing very rapidly. He's worried and really wants to have a cure because if they can cure all these diseases, then they can cure his wife. You get an emotional pull towards him when you hear that much of his backstory. And when he goes to approach Dr. Tim Fanning, you discover that obviously Tim Fanning knows, Dr. Lear's wife on some level, or at least is sympathetic to Dr. Lear, and so you kind of understand why it's important to go ahead and try to find some cure for diseases. Lila ends up showing up at Lacey's house. Obviously, she got the information from Amy that they were in Wisconsin. She knows Brad has only one person he knows in Wisconsin, so she did the math. She went and met them there. And Lacey, although she knows that maybe Brad himself can't blow the whistle on Project Noah, she decides maybe she can. She feels like she owes it to humanity. And you don't know a lot about her backstory, but I'm assuming there's a lot more to Lacey because she says, I've got to do this and I kind of owe humankind or mankind to do this for them. So she feels like she has a moral responsibility to blow the whistle for Brad if he can't do it himself because he's obviously got to get Amy to safety, so he can't be like stopping to give press conferences. So Brad divulges all of his dealings with Project Noah to Lacey and gives her names and everything else. I think he even tells her the names of the inmates procured for them and everything. So he actually knows quite a bit. He doesn't necessarily know exactly what they're doing and what the experiment is, but he knows he's procuring these people, these death row inmates and Amy for some sort of medical study that's not obviously approved, or at least publicly approved. Then we have the death row inmate that we saw in episode 1. That's the first person that we see Brad talking to, Anthony Carter, and he's a death row inmate. And so you see Brad trying to convince him to go ahead and do the Project Noah thing. Anthony Carter's like, okay, fine, he agrees. And so he's the first person that we're going to see through from regular life to actually being injected with the serum, and we're going to see how that plays out for him. So in this episode, Anthony Carter is newly injected with the serum, so he's already had it. And I don't remember if they showed us the episode where he had it, but I do remember seeing his physical exam prior to it, and then they end up giving it to him, and he's feeling strong and everything, but he's, thinking everything's cool, but he's also having some visions, so we'll get back to that. Now, this is going to sound super racist, and I preface this with this only because it's kind of funny, and it's not funny oh, is it race funny? It's funny, ha ha, wouldn't it be this? it seems that Anthony Carter, so far as we can tell, and this is only the second episode, but we see that he seems to be handling the injection really well. And I'm thinking, wouldn't it be hilarious if they all discover that only black people can handle the serum and that's the only people? Like, I just think that would be funny. And obviously, I don't think that's how they're going to play it, but I think it's hilarious. I'm like, wouldn't that be a whole bunch of ish if they discover that, hey, black people don't deteriorate at all when you give them the serum? Because we don't see any other. I think there is one person down there who's black that's a vampire, but as far as I know, they've only focused on Anthony, and Anthony Carter, he seems fine after he had it. He's feeling strong. What if they get Amy and they do it to her, and if she's okay? I think that we're going to realize, hey, black people seem to take to this like hotcakes. So what I think is kind of weird, and I guess it makes sense now that I've had time to think about it, but we see Tim Fanning visit Anthony Carter in his dreams, because what they thought that all of these vampires, they believed that they were mute and believed that they were just in a vegetative state. But it turns out that what they're now discovering, or at least what we see, is that they actually do communicate and look normal, at least in their telepathic communications with each other. And I don't know if it's that they're dream walking each other or if they're just, putting their thoughts in other people's heads. But by the looks of it, it looks like they're actually able to insert themselves in each other's dreams. And Tim Fanning is the HVIC. He's the head vampire in charge. I guess because he's patient zero, and they killed the guy from the Bolivian highlands that was the 250-year-old guy, and so maybe he was patient zero, but now Tim Fanning is patient zero, which I guess means he is the head nacho. Tim Fanning is the HVIC, and he warns Carter in a dream or whatever. Like, there's Shauna Babcock, who is the other one that didn't deteriorate when they gave her the serum because she was younger, at least that's what they believe, and because she was younger, that she was able to handle the serum. And Tim Fanning in a whole dream with Anthony Carter, and I think he gives them a warning through Anthony Carter, and I don't remember the verbatim what the warning is, but he gives it. But they look all normal in their dreams, and I wouldn't call them hallucinations, more like just another way of communicating. It's like a weird form of telepathy where they literally take their whole being and like communicate that way, because they look fine, even though Tim Fanning is looking rough in real life. He looks fine and when he's inside people's heads. And it looks like they're able to get in the head of anybody they actually see. So I guess they would have to have had actual contact with them. Though I don't think that they saw Anthony Carter, but I think it's because he's had the serum, and so now he's technically one of them. They can communicate with him. Brad and Lila kiss in this episode, and I'm like, oh. Which I'm not like not rooting for them to get together, but I'm just like, oh, there's the romance. I kind of like the idea of just really seeing him be like this kick butt dad, and so it's kind of like, oh, now there's a romance between these two I gotta care about. But I guess it's fine. Like, it's an interesting development. We already knew that Lila basically still wants Brad. I just wanted to point out also that this show is amazing acting by Amy. I think her name is Sonia, is how you say it. Whoever she is in real life, that child actor is amazing. She has good chemistry with Mark Paul Gosselaar. She has just a good, she's so intelligent, and obviously she's intelligent in real life if she's being a whole actress, but she is an amazing little actress. All the cast is like grade A people. It's a really good meld, and they do sarcasm better than anybody I've seen. So it's awesome. One thing that I find annoying is Lacey says she trusts this guy that she got to get rid of the car that Brad and Amy ended up driving in, and so that Project Noah wouldn't find them, or more specifically so that Clark Richards wouldn't find them, she gets rid of it and is like, I can trust this guy. This guy is so bitch made, and I'll tell you why. He literally breaks with one hit to the face. One hit. Clark Richards just pops him a good one, gives him a little love tap and a threat, and he just spills the beans. And I'm like, this was the guy you trusted? Like, he's a tow truck guy. He gave a Instagram be ruining every video. Like, she trusts him so much, and this dude literally gives up minimal resistance, and the moment he gets a little love tap and a threat, he gives all the information. They find Lacey's house like it's nothing. And I'm like, this is the dude you trusted, Lacey? Really? You live off the grid and you live with guns and all sorts of booby traps only to have this one dude be completely untrustworthy? Like, you need to vet your friends better. Project Noah gets to Lacey's house, and Lacey and Brad are shooting it out, and Lila and Amy are hiding. And so Lacey gets shot, and I'm like, you killed off the one black lady I could root for. And again, I'm not saying it because it matters at all to her. If she was white, I'd like her just the same. And Brad's like, no, Lacey, no. But he doesn't mourn too bad because he keeps shooting. And then he finally gives himself up. Or at least I think he thinks that he'll be able to get away if he just, or Amy and Lila will get away if he gives himself up. So he gives himself up. But then Amy is like, remember, she remembers that she and Brad promised each other they wouldn't leave each other. And when Brad was unconscious, for her, that was like a form of him leaving her. And remember, her mom died of a drug overdose and she left her. So she really is like, you got to keep your word. If you promise not to leave me, don't leave. She also keeps that same promise. She's like, hey, I told you to promise not to leave me. And so she sticks to that too. And so when Brad gives himself up, somehow she gets away from Lila and she gives herself up too. And so Project Noah gets them both. And I'm crushed. I'm like, no. And I thought they were going to like get away at the last minute, but they don't. They get put in the back of a black SUV or something, or a black van, and that's it. They go away with Project Noah. And I'm just like, oh, Lacey died for you and y'all gave yourselves up. What is the world coming to? Now we move on to episode 3. Okay, episode 3, which I am grateful for, and sorry if you can see the spit flying out of my mouth whenever I say certain words. I used to say 3 in a very bad way, and so now, because I've had to reteach myself how to be proper and enunciate, every once in a while I enunciate with a little bit of the weather. So ignore that if you see it, just ride through. So, the 3rd episode is titled, That Never Should Have Happened to You. It opens with Shauna Babcock basically being almost raped by these Project Noah agents. And you first see her interaction, and I don't know if this is the first time she's interacted with Clark Richards, but that's where it opens, with Clark Richards basically saving her from these rogue agents who are trying to rape her before she even gets to intake for Project Noah. And that is even before she's ever even had an injection. So we see Shauna just totally normal. So it's kind of good because we didn't have any backstory to Shauna, because to me she looked really young for a death row inmate, and so now we kind of see why that is, because we get a lot of her backstory in this episode. And I'm going to just put this out there because I believe that Clark Richards and Shauna Babcock have taken a page out of Edward Cullen and Bella Swan's book. I say this because while she's still on the ground after being nearly raped, they're talking about the weather, and she's like, brr, it's cold here in comparison to Las Vegas. She's like, I'm a desert rat. And I'm like, that's a weird way to give exposition, but whatever. We learned she's from Vegas and he's from like Chicago or something. I don't know. I don't really care where he's from, so I might have gotten that wrong. But anyway, he's from where it's cold. Then she says almost identically the same thing that Bella said to Edward in Twilight. When Bella says to Edward, like, we're talking about the weather, as in like, this is the weirdest amount of small talk ever. And so she says that to Clark too, and he's like, we're both like expert conversationalists. It's kind of dumb. The synopsis for this episode is Brad tries to make a deal with Dr. Sykes and Richards to remain at Project Noah with Amy in order to start testing the virus on her. Brad makes an alliance to gather information about the inmate's condition in 4B, and Babcock talks about her past. Now, they use that term very loosely, talks, because that is not how Shauna talks about her past, but we'll get into that later. Amy and Brad are now transported. They're in Colorado, and they are at Project Noah headquarters, and that's where this episode, after the Shauna Babcock stuff happens, we find them in this episode. They're at the actual headquarters of Project Noah. Now, I didn't include in the last one because it didn't seem like all that relevant, but I'm going to include it here because in part of the last one, I guess every inmate, or I guess every vampire has someone assigned to basically watching their cage or their cell. Shauna has one, Tim Fanning has one, and I guess all of them have one. The one that is in charge of Shauna, I guess, has just been kind of a jerk. And so he's talking to the overseer of Tim Fanning's cage or cell, and then they're like making some jokes or whatever. He ends up kicking that guy's badge into Shauna's cell, and that guy's able to pull out his badge from Shauna's cell, no problem. And then when the guy who's the overseer of Shauna's cage or cell gets too close, she immediately pulls him in and drinks him like a Capri Sun. So she takes him down. kills him. So that's a little backstory on why they're doing this now. So they're debriefing the overseer slash janitor slash, I don't know, zookeeper. I don't know what he is exactly or what his credentials necessarily need to be to have this job, but he's in charge of Tim Fanning's cell. They're interviewing him or debriefing him because he watched what Shauna did to the other dude. You also learn that this particular overseer is basically Tim Fanning's Renfeld. Do you know how Dracula had Renfeld? That's basically who he is to Tim Fanning. It's kind of a nice little parallel, but that's who they are. At least it seems like it. So yeah, they go on, they're debriefing him, and they're trying to find out why Shauna would not hurt him, but would hurt the other guy as soon as he got close enough to the cell. And that guy floats the idea that, well, he was a jerk to her, so maybe she was like doing it as revenge. But then one of the other scientists in the room, the one that talks about, I think it's the one that talks about them helping the delightful vampire white supremacist, he's like, they don't think like that, you know, they don't have cognitive reasoning or whatever, like they are basically animals. And he's like, well, old dude was a dick to her, so maybe she was getting him back, and that's why she downed him like a big gulp. They're kind of deciding what should they do with Shauna because this new behavior is sort of interesting. It's not happened in the 3 years that Tim Fanning's been there. And it turns out Clark Richards, who we thought, you know, liked her a little bit from what we saw him saving her in the beginning, and then he was okay with her infiltrating his dreams while he was with Dr. Sykes in bed. He was dreaming about Shauna, but apparently he wasn't cool with that because he immediately goes, let's euthanize her. And I'm like, euthanize her? She's not a dog. She's a human. You don't euthanize people. And I don't even like it when they euthanize dogs. But I'm like, you euthanize her? Like, she's nothing but an animal to you, and you clearly are cool with like banging her in dreams. So we learned a little bit, and I wrote this down because I felt really uneducated in the other recaps when I was talking about why Amy's so important. So I wrote this down verbatim so that I could hopefully help you understand if you missed it too. The reason why they think Amy will do better with the serum is because Amy's central nervous system is more plastic, according to Dr. Sykes. That's just doctor jargon to me. All I hear is blah, 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 blah. Tim Fanning is the HVIC. So he can telepathically connect with all these people, and so he does regularly, and he sits with Shauna and he's like, so you beat one death sentence only to get struck down by another one because you wanted to have a cheat meal, and cheat meal meaning she ate somebody. I love his character. I've never seen him in this light in anything he's acted in, but I'm here for it. He's pretty funny. So he's like, the best thing you can do is tell Clark Richards your story. That will help him look at you like you're human and not want to euthanize you or treat you like an animal. And so Shauna's like, all right. And so we get a lot of backstory about Shauna in this episode because she's feeding this all telepathically, with pictures included, to Clark Richards. Now, Brad and Amy. Okay, so Amy gets there and she causes a big scene. And then when Dr. Sykes, finally sees her, she's really sweet to her. And it's so hard because I want to not like Dr. Sykes, but every time I see that little bit of empathy in her eyes and that little moral dilemma, and then how sweet she is to Amy, I'm like, man, now I just kind of want to know her story because I'm like, why are you so likable even though you're a jerk? I think it has something to do with her British accent. I'm always suckered by a British accent, and she's got one. So maybe that's it. I don't know. She tells Amy, like, I promise you we're not going to hurt you, or I will not hurt you. And so she ends up getting Brad for Amy because that's Amy's only request, is that she gets Brad. Brad is upset because he tells Clark Richards, like, you already know that I sat by the bedside of a child, helpless and not able to do anything once before. And now you have me doing this again. Like, he's kind of looking at him like, bro, I thought we were buddies. Turns out you're nothing but a paid man too. But of course, when he gets in there with Amy, like, all of that goes out the window, and he's just on daddy mode, and he's such a good papa. And Amy is so intelligent. She immediately tells him it's like 29 steps from here to here, and like she's been counting all of it, and she's been doing everything to like show that she wants to get out. And she even tells him like, let's get out of here. And it's so sweet. Their connection is awesome. That's what's reeling me in, and because I think that their mythology about the vampires is really dope. And I want to see where that goes, but I'm so reeled in because I'm so attached to these characters already, and it's the 3rd episode. In real life, we see Tim Fanning in his cell, and is it just me, or does he look even worse than he looked last week? He looks bad. I'm like, man, those veins are really popping on your face, and you're like bloody teeth. He looks like I look when I eat popcorn, because I have really sensitive gums. My gums bleed, and so I can't really eat popcorn, even though I really like the Okido hot popcorn, but realistically, I shouldn't eat it because I have really sensitive gums. comes and they bleed, he looks like me eating popcorn. Like, he's just bloody in there. And I'm like, didn't you even lose some teeth? Like, what's going on? Like, once they inject Amy with the serum, it's like a light switches on for him, and he immediately knows that a new vamp has been created. Brad sits by Amy's side, and it's so sweet because he's like, she starts looking at them injecting her, and he's like, don't look at that, look at me. And I'm just like, yes, Mark Paul Gosselaar, I will look at you. I will. So we see Shauna and we get to know some of her backstory. And her backstory starts with her friend taking a picture of her and it looks like she's been shot in the head. Well, it turns out Shauna used to have dreams of becoming a Hollywood makeup artist. You know, she just wanted to work in films and doing, kind of gory makeup. And so we see her with her friends and they're talking about some warehouse party that they're going to go to. One of her friends walks in and check this out. She is dressed as a unicorn. And you might be like, who cares? But episode 2 was called You Owe Me a Unicorn. And then in episode 3, we see Shauna's friend dressed as a unicorn. And I'm like, is there some meaning there? I mean, I'm drawing parallels here because she's a unicorn. You owe me a unicorn. She's dressed as a unicorn. Anyway, they're at this party and Shauna's friend, who was the unicorn, is being assaulted by a guy or he's just being too handsy, and Shauna sees it while she's with another dude, and so she just grabs a glass or a bottle or something and slashes that guy who was trying to hurt her friend. And so you see this really protective streak in Shauna, and it gets you curious because you're like, why is Shauna so protective? We do understand in a little bit. And the nurse comes in to check on Amy. She is facing Amy and like doing her thing, and Amy, I think, is catching wind of what Brad's about to do. So she like gets all the attention on her, and Brad takes a syringe and a vial of, I don't know what it is. So he keeps it because he's trying to protect his baby. And like I already said, I think that Tim Fanning's overseer of his cell is his Renfield. I don't know how you say it. I say Renfield because I saw it spelled out like that, but yeah. So he's the Renfield to Tim Fanning's Dracula. He is weirdly like in Amy's room, standing over her, watching her sleep. And of course, Mark Paul Gosselaar's like, not today. He gets up and he's like, what are you doing? Like, he's protecting his baby. You're made to believe that he's really unintelligent, and then he ends up articulating something finally after stammering for a while, like I do in videos that I don't edit. So he stammers some stuff, and finally he says, he's coming for her, you gotta get her out of here, you gotta protect her. And Brad's like, who? And he's like, Fanning. And so that's kind of the first thing Brad hears about Dr. Tim Fanning, is that for some reason Fanning now wants Amy, and so Renfield, or I'm gonna call him Renfield because we don't know his name, and if they ever gave it, I didn't pay attention because he's not a main character. Fanning's Renfield is like kind of having that same conscience that Renfield in Bram Stoker's Dracula had for Mina. Is it Mina or Mira? I don't know. I think it was Mina. But he warns Mina, and so in this one he's warning Brad for Amy. So I guess it's kind of parallel. So he tells Brad, you need to get Amy out of this piece because Tim Fanning, the HVIC, is coming. Then we see that Amy hears Anthony Carter on the other side of her room. I guess that's where his room is. And so she's like, he sounds nice. Well, Brad's like, I know all about Carter because I'm the reason he's here. He's like, I saved his life from death row, only to put him on this death row, basically. Everything that we see in backstory about Shauna has been fed to Clark through Shauna. She's trying to humanize herself to Clark. And so Clark is kind of confused, and remember, he doesn't have very much information on these inmates that they have tested on. He gets Brad and asks him, hey, was Shauna abused, or maybe possibly did she want to become some kind of a makeup artist and moved to California? And so Brad's like, are you writing a book? Like, why do you care? He humors him though, and he tells him like, yeah, that's true. She was going to do that. That was her plan. At least that's what we know from what she said in her file, because she was a death row inmate. And then he's like, did she have any sexual abuse? And it's like, yeah, they couldn't prove it, but they believe that she had some sexual abuse from her stepdad. And so we did see that a little bit of some weird moment between Shauna and her stepdad in her backstory vision that she gives Clark. Then we see Lila, and Lila is calling like hospitals, or I think she's not calling hospitals, I think she's calling prisons, and she's asking about all of these inmates because as far as they know, there have been 12 inmates who were on death row, and then coincidentally, before they could ever be put to death, they are reported as dead, just like Brad, because on the news there was a Amber Alert out for Brad, who had abducted Amy allegedly. But then we discovered that once they got Brad and Amy to Colorado for Project Noah, they decided to say that Brad was killed because he killed people in the sheriff's department and other people. But really, that's not what happened. The Project Noah people did that, but they are saying that Brad is dead. That's what the reports are saying. And so Lila knows that's not true because she saw Brad turn himself in and saw Amy and him get escorted to Project Noah. So she knows that they're still alive. So she's trying to look for all these inmates because remember, Brad told Lacey the whole story, and so she knows all this stuff too because she was sitting there when Brad was telling Lacey. So she knows, and so she's calling around, and only one place finally says something, and they say, Shauna Babcock, well, she didn't die. She was taken off by some government agents. That kind of helps Lila figure out that Brad's story is true, which I don't even really know why she needed that. I think that she's planning to blow the whistle because obviously Lacey didn't get to do it because they shot her. So now she's like taking on the mantle of whistleblower. Brad wants to go down to level 4B and see all of these inmates that he helped recruit for this thing. And it is hilarious because the way he does that is he sneaks out of the room he's in with Amy and he bird boxes Fanning's Renfield. And I know you're like, Bird Box? If you didn't see Bird Box, then you don't know what I'm talking about. But he bird boxes him like those crazy people who were bird boxing people because they wanted them to see the beautiful sight, even though they knew that they would just commit suicide after they saw it. So he literally like injects Renfield with whatever meds were in the syringe that he stole. When he gets to 4B, or the entrance to 4B, I guess it's a retinal scan they do. So he just pulls his eye open, and he doesn't kill him. He just pulls his eye open and sticks it up to the thing so that he can get in there. And I was like, good thing you knocked him out before you did that, because that looks like it hurt. So he did that. And then he gets in there, and as he's looking around and he's getting like a good front row seat to what's going on, guess who pops in? Guess. Dr. Jonas Lear is like, so you made it here. And he basically is like, well, let me tell you what happened. And we're led to believe that he told Brad everything. We obviously don't witness the entire conversation, so more could have happened, and I think they're going to feed that to us later on. And then guess what happens? Just guess. Lacey's alive. Lacey is alive and hiding in some hotel room with Lila. She didn't die. They shot her. She didn't die. She's tough to kill. And she's like cleaning her gun because she's like, yeah, I plan to kill the guy who shot me. I'm like, that's my pistol packing Lacey. I swear, like, she's one episode. I already like her. I like all of them. Like, this show is amazing. Then we have Shauna, and poor Shauna, we discover that not only was she on death row, and it's kind of weird because she's still pretty young and, well, relatively young. Her mom is the one, once she cut the guy for hitting on her friend at the warehouse party, she goes to jail, and her mom has to pick her up from jail, and it turns out she actually lives with her mom and her stepdad. And so we discover that Shauna has saved up about $3,000 to go to LA and start her makeup career that she wanted to do. And we discovered, oh no, her stepdad stole the money, or I didn't even steal it. Her mom was just basically like, well, he needed it to pay something, so he just took it. Instagram. So he took the money, and her mom's just nonchalant about it. And I don't know the actress's name who plays her mom, but I will tell you this. I knew it was bad news when I saw her. And you want to know why? Because I loved the show Sliders, and I liked Quinn, who was played by Jerry O'Connell. And I really was invested in him, and this girl ruined Quinn's life in Sliders, too. And that's how I knew she was going to ruin Shauna's life, and she does. She's one of those moms that doesn't believe their kid when their kid tells them that the dude that they're with has been molesting her. And she tells her mom everything, and her mom just basically doesn't even respond. And Shauna's like, could you please react to what I just told you? And then her mom just flippantly blows it off like, really? He's really been raping you? And I'm just like, man. She's all, you could have said no, he's a gentle butterfly, or some other dumb way she says it. And so Shauna is crushed that her mom does not believe her. And not only that she doesn't believe her, but that she's actually taking up for her husband instead of her daughter. And I'm just like, you never do that. You err on the side of caution. But her mom doesn't, and Shauna obviously realizes her mom's never going to change. She grabs a kitchen knife and gets her, tags her, kills her. And then as her stepdad is in the other room, he's like, you okay in there? And we see Shauna walking off with a knife. And so we're led to believe that she killed both of them, and that's how she got on death row. As we're seeing all of this and empathizing with Shauna, Clark Richards is seeing all of this. And he's in the process of euthanizing Shauna. But after he sees all this and they have Shauna like burning by death by sunlight, he decides, no, I can't do this to her. So he shuts that down and Shauna doesn't die. Woohoo! Tim Fanning was right. All she had to do was be human to Clark Richards and he wouldn't let her die, and he didn't. We do see some emotion from Clark Richards in this episode too, and we kind of see that, okay, he's a more human than we think, and we do see his relationship with Dr. Sykes a little bit too, because they start talking and they're asking, and Dr. Sykes asks Clark Richards, like, hey, do you think that after all this is said and done, like, we can go and live like a regular life? And basically he's telling her, like, don't feel bad about what we had to do here because we answered the call. He's one of those dudes who's like gung-ho for their job to the point of absurdity, where you're just going to do anything for it. And I'm just like, I see your point, but still, dude, you gotta like have some courage to stand up and have some form of convictions more than just liking the looks of Shauna Babcock. Because he did save her, but I still am curious as to why he cares. We end the episode with Brad going back to Amy's room, and he lays down for what we see is like the night. We think he's going to sleep, but he hears a noise. He gets up, goes into the hall, and lo and behold, guess who's there to threaten him? Tim Fanning. I don't think he got loose. I think he's just in Brad's mind because Brad was down there in 4B with Dr. Lear, and so he saw Fanning. And so now that he's seen Fanning, Fanning can get into his head, and I think that's what happens. But I don't know for sure. So that's where it ends off. I am so excited. When I tell you that I am so excited about episode 4, like, that is an understatement. I love this show for some reason. I am drawn to all the characters. I am invested in their world. I'm invested in Amy. I'm invested in Lila. I'm Shauna even. Clark Richards, Anthony Carter. Like, I just want to see how this all pans out. It's always on Mondays on Fox, 9, 8 Central. And so whatever channel Fox is for you, you can watch it there. But Hulu does have it too. So if you don't on TV, you can catch it on Hulu. And hopefully episode 4 is up early like episode 3 was, and we can watch it together. Go into the comments and please share your thoughts and opinions on the show. What did you take from it? Did you catch something that I didn't catch? Did I alert you to something maybe you didn't realize? Leave that below. Like, subscribe, comment, share, smoke signal, carrier pigeon, Morse code, telegram, food stamp. Tell somebody that knows somebody, and share this recap so we can all talk about it and hopefully keep this show on the air because it's good so far. Tell me also what other shows I should talk about and recap on. I'll be recapping some novels and stuff too, and it's not going to be The Passage, but it'll be other novels because, like I said, I'm going to be doing multicultural and diverse cast novels. I will be on that here within the next week or so. Anyway, I will catch you all later, and bye, Peaches.
Have you ever felt?
Are you listening?